Our objective. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime: Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
Imagine a man backing a country that has murdered over 100,000 people, human beings, that has invaded its neighbors. Syria, Lebanon has destroyed the West Bank, has murdered people in Gaza, and saying that they are the bullies of the Middle East. That is a bit rich. The United States has been a state sponsor of terror all throughout the Middle East, going all the way back to the George Bush administration, unprovoked war on Iraq, backing ISIS, Donald Trump shaking the hand of a literal head chopper that was running ISIS and installed himself as president of Syria. That is astonishing, especially considering Trump is on video saying we're stealing the oil, with the Obama administration putting billions of dollars into that enterprise of doing that, of basically overthrowing that government. But okay, habitual liars lie. So that is not necessarily a shocking thing. There is a truth behind this, and I want to dig into that because it's complicated. Trump is lying, and it's far more complicated than what the media in the United States is effectively describing it as. Trump, however, is lying. I would like to also point out that I nailed this before it happened. I hit Lath up yesterday. I said, Lath, there's a lot of chum in the water. And when I see chum in the water, it's making me think that something is about to happen, something's brewing. So I would like you to come on Monday. Now, I don't know if Lath did it because my phone is over there charging, but I want to point out that I also nailed it. The reason, what I mean by chum in the water, you got reports coming out like this. Trump back channel to Iran failed after Supreme Leader went dark because the Ayatollah Iran realized that the cell phones were allowing some of the drone operators that were in Iran. And so they shut them down. He went into a bunker. Thankfully, somebody in Iran is going into a bunker. But Erdogan is a snake. Full stop. Erdogan can't be trusted. Full stop. If you remember Soleimani, when he got murdered by the United States, he was going on a mission of peace, believing that he was going to make some kind of amends, I believe with Saudi Arabia, if I'm not mistaken. Erdogan is a snake. Trump is a habitual liar, not to be trusted. This also came out right here. And I even put, this is chum. So Trump has moved all the hardware into a striking position, including bombers and now advanced bitches. Sure, he has only now become aware of the reality of things. Point of fact, Israel's a colony of 8 million people, can't pull America into anything. Which, that tweet is perfectly right. You either attack or you don't. This is your war. Israel's just your client. What they're referring to is J.D. Vance. During the call, Vice President Vance pushed back, saying the United States shouldn't be directly involved and suggesting that the Israelis were going to drag the country into a war. I said, okay, that's weird, right? That's bizarre. You've been escalating for like a month. You've backed your colony to the hilt. And now, oh my God, you're dragging us into a war. I said, that's weird that this stuff is coming out now, in which case my thought is Seymour Hersh was most likely right, and that the United States was preparing for an attack. And here we are. The United States launched its attack. Trump puts it on Truth Social, the following tweet, because, this is kind of the ridiculousness, the clown car that we're effectively in. We have completely completed a very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz, Esfahani. All planes are now outside of Iranian airspace. A full payload of bombs were dropped on the primary site, Fordow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There's not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention on this matter. You're right. There's not another military of sociopaths to the degree that would have launched an unprovoked attack on Iran. Here is the truth, and here is the catch, because I need to break this down, because this gets very complicated. And by the way, here is footage. I believe this is Fordow. Now, problem. If you know as a flat fact that America is already in the war, if you know as a flat fact that the nuclear stalking horse was always fake, that the negotiations were never really real, that this notion that we're trying to build a bomb was always nonsense, this was never an honest, let's say, assessment of things, then what do you do as Iran? And, don't take my word for it. Right here. I mean, granted, I've shown over and over again IAEA Tulsi Gabbard before she, started to turn her tail up to Donald Trump. A senior intelligence official tells me that there is zero independent U.S. intelligence to back up CIA Director John Ratcliffe's pronouncement that Iran is, quote, at the 1 yard line, unquote, of a nuclear weapon. All of the intelligence is from Israel. Interesting, right? When Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, was actually doing her job and pointed out, hey, this is not really the case. And IAEA Grossi, who was working with the Israelis, even come out and said, this is not the case. Meaning, this was always nonsense. They had nothing to back this up. And by the way, even if they did have anything to back this up, so what? From my point of view, Iran should already have a bomb. This war wouldn't have started. If they did have a bomb, they're a sovereign country. And even if they were building a bomb, this is not the purview of the United States. All of this, as I keep pointing out, is about regime change, a continuity of the deep state of the U.S. Donald Trump is not against the deep state. He is the deep state. And MAGA has been working themselves into a tizzy. They try to make themselves to believe that Trump is something that he's effectively not. Whatever the president, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and now Iran being the last one, this is their objective. Now, assuming that, with that workable point of view, let's analyze what is taking place. For one, Fordow nuclear power facility is buried 80 meters beneath a mountain. It will take you, even by U.S. estimates or assessments, a hell of a lot more than one bombing strike to get to that nuclear facility. 2, because you have effectively telegraphed that you were going to attack the site, and because Iran brain is not made of Swiss cheese, they full well understood that the United States was already in the war and that they were already fighting the United States. So considering that you were preempting and telegraphing what you were going to do, if you were Iran, what would you do? I know. You'd move all of the equipment and all of the nuclear material out of the area. So there was nothing in those bases. There was no people in those bases. If you've noticed, there's been no casualties at all because the people had already left the facilities apparently weeks ago. And Fordow, apparently, it's not even all that damage. The damage is apparently superficial. Donald Trump apparently bombed a limited bombing raid on the entrance to the facility. This comes out in a few cases. So one, Iranian media is claiming this. There's that. But again, given the, let's say, what even U.S. assessments said would be required to take down that facility, you can go with Iranian media and say, okay, well, this is not necessarily insane. Iranian media claims that Fordow, Natanz, Esfahani nuclear facilities have been evacuated prior to tonight's American strikes against them. And DD Geopolitics, Sarah Bills, beautiful, brilliant. She says, obviously, because, again, their brains have not made of Swiss cheese. They understand that Israel is a client and that ultimately the war is the U.S. using its client to go after Iran. They get it. They understand it. So it's not like, oh my God, the U.S. is getting directly involved. The U.S. was already directly involved. Here's a member of parliament pointing out something very similar right here. It says, contrary to the statements by the lying U.S. president, the nuclear facilities at Fort Howe were not seriously damaged. Only the above ground structures, which could be restored, were damaged. In addition, everything that could pose a danger to the population was evacuated in advance. There are no reports of any nuclear emissions. Trump's false claims about, quote, destruction of Fort Howe, unquote, are refuted by the fact that the attacks were so superficial that there were not even fatalities at the facilities. But we regard this U.S. aggression as America's direct entry into the war. Now Iran will decide how and what way to respond to the United States' blatant stupidity. There's that. Theater. Complete theater. But theater with a very specific purpose. I had to write this down because I was right much. This creates serious questions. Trump talked himself into a corner. Now, I would have plenty of guests that would come on the show that would say, well, Donald Trump can walk anything back because Donald Trump is a habitual liar. And I would point out to them, no, there's certain things you can walk back. You can pretend as if you're talking to Xi Jinping on the phone. That's fine. You can pretend as if you have a big, beautiful deal and all of this other stuff, or that eggs and the price are going down and really they're going up. You could do that. But you can't spend 3 months telling people that you're going to bomb a country if they don't do X. And they don't do X. And not just not do X. They beat the stuffing out of your client. And you stand there with thumb and ass having to do something. You've talked yourself into a corner. You can't walk that back. So you are forced into the situation based upon the things that you've said. You've boxed yourself in to where you need to respond. This is Donald Trump effectively responding. Again, he's surrounded by whack jobs, neocons. Donald Trump himself has had a hard on against Iran, even going back to his first administration. And again, regardless of the US president and what is in the president's mind, each president has taken one step to get closer and closer and closer to Iran, taking down one country after the next, until you finally take it down Syria, where Iran is your last target. So it was inevitable that he was going to go after Iran. It was obvious based on the language that he was using, based on the framing of the quote unquote negotiations, where they could never really come to any kind of real tangible thing, and that Donald Trump kept escalating his demands in those negotiations. Had nothing to do about a nuclear weapon, had nothing to do about a bomb, has everything to do about finding a means to overthrow the Iranian government and turn it into a failed state. Seymour Hersh's article is correct. It may not be correct in the context of one strike does it, but that's where it gets very interesting. So right off the bat, I talked about them removing it. The interesting question is, what does Iran do? Right? What does Iran do? Now, Iran has themselves made the point of saying they were going to respond. And so in the same way that Donald Trump is kind of stuck in a box and having to act, Iran, on some level, you would imagine, have to also act, if only to show parity. Now, gets very interesting, it gets very complicated, and gets very dark. And so it needs to be stepped through. Iran has said that the bases around it are fair game and that they will go after them. So the catch becomes, okay, if that's true, how many body bags are going to be sent back to the US? Iran has said that the ships and everything else are fair game. And hypersonic missiles can take down aircraft carriers if they need to and if they indeed decide to do so. Will they do that? These are all questions. Will they shut down the Strait of Hormuz? How will Iran respond? And you would imagine, considering that they have said over and over and over again, if you enter this war, you will regret it. If you enter this war, you will regret it. We will respond and we will respond. Okay, Trump has entered the war. It's limited. It's superficial. But what do you do? Does the superficiality of it matter? Or does the fact that the United States has invaded your airspace, invaded all notions of sovereignty, matter more? Meaning, whether it's theatrical or limited is irrelevant to the point that you did it. It's kind of like somebody, says something against you, and it's not even that what they said was interesting, even that biting, but it's the fact that they did it. It's the intention behind it. And what does Iran do? Iran, at this moment, is engaged in a war where they're trying to decimate and decapitate the Israeli government, this colony of squatters that have been committing a genocide and killed, murdered, massacred over 100,000 innocent people, the majority of which being women and children. So if you're engaged in that process, do you divert your attention and go after the United States, even if it's in a limited way, meaning we are going after you for parity. We're stepping on the escalatory ladder in the sense of hitting you and stopping and allowing you to make the next step. Or is it we're going to show dominance and we're going to go all out and unleash? Which one? There's also the third option of we will lose face in this moment because we do not want to create a justifiable idea in your mind that you attack us further as we try to decapitate Israel, meaning we will not hit you right now. We are going to continue to focus on our target, which is Israel, and we are going to take them apart before dealing with you in any of your terms, meaning we will hit you at a time of our choosing. But right now we have a very specific target, and we do not want to create any kind of justification for you to get involved. The reality of it is, even if Iran said we're only going to hit you on parity is subjective. Anything that you hit, even if you don't kill another American service member, the U.S. may say that is outrageous that you hit us, and so now we're going to hit you again, meaning creating a justification to get further ensconced into the war, further ensconced, even if the attacks are minor, further ensconced, another step on the escalatory ladder, where eventually you get to the point where on that escalatory ladder, especially if that is the entire point, that you're in a direct shooting war with the U.S. and Israel, with the U.S. using escalation as a somewhat organic means of getting directly involved, not necessarily wanting to get involved whole hog right off the bat. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I suspect that's more of the point of this, that they know that Iran has already said, we will hit you if you attack us. The U.S. does a limited strike. Iran, feeling the need to respond, does so. Whatever the response, the U.S. says, okay, you attacked us, so now we're hitting you back. In which case, you've stepped on an escalatory ladder where the attacks by the United States go higher and higher and higher, and the attacks by Iran gets higher and higher and higher, where you get to a point where you are just in a full-blown shooting war between the United States and Israel. That could be the point. That could be the point. Now, as I said, Iran could not do anything. And the U.S., if it did indeed attack again, is ended up in this kind of weird, awkward place of invading without really a pretext or having to create another pretext without the organic escalatory ladder that they were effectively trying to step on and trying to get Iran to step on with them. It is unclear. There's something that's interesting to me that doesn't ultimately matter because it ultimately ends up in the same place. But I often ask this question, what's in Trump's mind? Is it possible that Donald Trump didn't want to embroil himself into a large-scale war in the Middle East? The people around him knew he didn't want to embroil himself into a large-scale war in the Middle East. And so they present a plan of, quote-unquote, limited strikes with the belief of, hey, these are going to be limited, and Iran is not necessarily going to respond. And so you can do this, you can claim victory, and the world will be great. And you can show your strength. You can back up what you said you were going to do. You're a habitual liar, so it doesn't necessarily matter if you lie all that much to the public and saying you've destroyed the facilities, when in real terms, you haven't destroyed anything. But the people around him, knowing full well, if you do that, Iran is going to respond. And you, as a U.S. president, will have to respond. So regardless of what is in his mind, you can effectively manipulate him into stepping on the escalatory ladder that you know is going to continue to escalate and escalate and escalate because Iran is not going to back down. Or Trump did it knowingly. As I said, both of these things equal to the same thing. It doesn't matter. It's just my own curiosity on what is in his mind. The chipmunk that's running on a hamster wheel. what's there. But as I said, it doesn't ultimately matter. What matters is what Iran's response going to be. Do you focus on Israel, your primary opponent, or do you divert focus on some level to go after the U.S. in the way that you said you were going to go after the U.S., closing the Strait of Hormuz, attacking the Quisling governments in Saudi Arabia, UAE, etc., basically destroying those U.S. military bases? How far do you go? Isn't it fascinating? What needs to be clear, though, is that Donald Trump has entered the U.S. into an escalatory ladder with Iran, seemingly with the entire point being for Iran to respond, given the U.S. an organic premise to respond to Iran's response, in which case Iran will respond to the U.S. responding to Iran's response, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And on we go into war. If I had to guess, I'm suspecting that's it. That's the point. If the workable point of view is that the entire reality of this was fake, the entire premise was fake, and that the entire premise was to create a regime change war, would this be the thing to do it? Would this give you an organic reason and rationale to continue with attacks in order to help Israel in pursuing that objective? Now, Seymour Hersh in his article made the point that they want to overthrow the government of Iran. Now, Seymour Hersh, I don't think he said in the article they were trying to do that in one strike. But he did make the point of saying that was the ultimate objective. Wesley Clark, 20-something years ago, said that was the ultimate objective. The bunch of neocons and whack jobs would obviously want the U.S. to fight the war on its behalf every bit as much as Europe wanting the U.S. to fight the war on its behalf against the Russians. If you've noticed, though, what Russia has done is to avoid going after the governments that have been assisting Ukraine. The difference here, though, is that the U.S. and Russia, or let's say these other governments, didn't get directly involved in the way that the U.S. has gotten directly involved. So we will see. I mean, it's very possible that Iran could diminish Israel before turning to the U.S. That would lose face. That may even lose credibility. And frankly, it may even invite more attacks from the U.S. in general. Unclear. So I guess my thing is, all of these things entail a certain amount of risk. We are on an escalatory ladder, especially depending on how Iran responds. We will also see if Iran decides on a limited response, what does the U.S. do? Because that will give a clear indication on what is the objective of the U.S., meaning what is the objective of Donald Trump. Is it indeed, I'm all aboard for regime change? Or is it, okay, they responded, nobody got killed, they destroyed a little bit of property, let's call it a day. And can he do that? Can he do that? Can the U.S. president accept any response from Iran, even a limited one? Can he do that? In that speech that he gave, he pointed out, we would attack more, we would attack further, let's get to peace. Okay, well, they're not going to talk peace to you. You've just attacked them. You know that. So I have to assume that the entire point is further escalation by the U.S. The question is, as I said, what does Iran do? And can Iran, look, because under my model, if you don't do anything, they're going to hit you anyway. In their minds, sociopaths, they're weak, we can attack with impunity. And it's much likely, very likely, that the U.S. has been attacking Iran anyway, pretending as if it was Israel that was doing it. Iran has to know this. They have to know this. So they can just say, screw it, we're at war with the U.S. anyway. What does it matter? We're hitting their bases. Unclear. Either way, the U.S. has directly entered the war. The U.S. has put us on an escalatory ladder where we will get further involved in strikes. If Iran decides that it wants to hit, whether significantly or whether in a limited fashion, it's very possible that the U.S. is going to take that as license to attack back anyway. Israel and the U.S., as I keep pointing out, were already at war with Iran. It has now just become direct. I would also point out that from Iran's point of view, this was probably expected. So it's not like they're like, oh my God, the U.S. has just entered the war. From their point of view, the U.S. was already entered the war. This is just clarity for the rest of the world. It may just be business as usual. We will see. We will see. Either way you look at it, we're at a dangerous point. We're at a precipice of disaster. China's not going to back away from this. I don't believe Russia's going to back away from this. And now that the U.S. has entered the war, there are questions looming for China and Russia, right? I showed the clip of Vladimir Putin effectively saying we're fighting the same people. And in China's case, they made the point of saying you never know who else is going to get involved once you enter the war. You had Afghanistan, members or elements of Pakistan, all of which saying if you get into the war, we would also get involved. The question is now what? U.S. has entered the war. Now what? Everybody has threats on the table. Are they going to fulfill those threats? I suppose we'll see. We'll see together. I think that's everything. Let me see if there's anything else. Well, yeah. I guess we can enjoy a little bit of this while we're at it. So, the attacks were still taking place yesterday. And before I get to that, what Iran is going to do is going to be very telling. How the U.S. responds is even going to be more telling. And as I keep pointing out, Russia and China are waiting to see what happens. They're waiting to see what everyone else does. How far does the U.S. get involved? How far are these strikes going to go? How long will they continue? Is this a one and done? Is this Donald Trump not wanting to embroil himself into a larger Middle East conflict, but wanting to fulfill his own ego? What is it in real terms? What is it in reality? That's what all of them are trying to figure out. Is Iran going to just continue attacks on Israel? Is Iran going to attack the U.S. bases? Is Iran going to attack the U.S. ships? Is Iran going to close the Strait of Hormuz? Is Pakistan going to get involved in some fashion or some way? What are they going to do? What is everybody going to do? It needs to be clear, though. This is Trump's war. Trump did this. These questions are looming because of Trump. Does Russia get involved in a more overt sense? Does China get involved in a more overt sense beyond sending in armaments and weapons and materials? And obviously, Russia is going to be doing the same. Russia's put out notions of saying, hey, we have a nuclear scientist. Don't touch. These are safe spaces. Don't touch. Don't touch. Trump has left a lot of balls in the air. All of these things are unpredictable. There's no way, I believe, for a moment that they can predict what is going to take place in the White House. I don't think they're that bright. I'm not even sure they care that much beyond the U.S. getting directly involved into the war. We'll see. And I suspect we'll see sooner rather than later. Yeah, we'll see sooner rather than later. On the other side, you can enjoy a little bit of this, considering we are about to enter fuckery. We are about to enter fuckery. An unpredictable fuckery at that. This is an Israeli soldier trying to tell everybody everything is...
Coming to life from Khan Yunis. Everything is okay, everything is fine, no problems, no more explosions.
What the fuck? What the fuck? And I believe this took place yesterday. Meaning that attacks are still taking place. Now, I saw a report that said that they didn't see anything over 24 hours. For me, this was yesterday. And I believe there's more. Apparently, there are people in rubble under that one. I don't know if I showed the video of them hitting the Minister of Interiors in Israel, but I'll show it here just in case I didn't show it in my other video. And I think there's more. So Iran is given a heads up to evacuate the Dimona reactor in Israel. Now, Israel has been doing strikes on reactors in Iran. So, look, from my point of view, I don't know why that thing is still standing. From my point of view, I don't even know why you're giving an indication for people to leave. Hit it. Just hit it. Why are you telegraphing your punches? Just hit it. But see, that's the rub. Iran has been pretty restrained this entire war, and more so restrained when dealing with the United States in regards to hitting U.S. targets. When those ships were accumulating, if it was the U.S., they would have been fair game. You would have hit them immediately. It's easier to hit a B-2 bomber on the ground as opposed to hitting it in the air, right? If you have a bunch of warships and aircraft carriers that are effectively lining up to hit you, once again, those things seem fair game. That is me thinking as an American. Iranian doctrine is a little bit different. They, in their doctrine, apparently absorbs and then responds. I suppose not wanting to create a justification and wanting to, at the very least, preventing anyone from saying, well, you hit us in an unprovoked war of aggression, blah, 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 blah. Obviously, we hit them in an unprovoked war of aggression. We didn't care all that much. So there's that. Last, and I guess there are two more. This was a drone that got through Israeli air defense. And if this is getting through Israeli air defense during the daytime, this does not bode well for Israel. We're right here. Now, this is what this ended up looking like after the fact. I hit an apartment building. And you can see the damage to that apartment building after the fact. And again, the question is, if these drones have started to get through during the daytime, oh my God. Wow, that drone knocked the shirt off that guy. Knocked the shirt off of him. Wow, that's a big hole you got there, bro. Yep, that's a big hole. Here's another interesting video. God's chosen people.
وين نولي؟ ننام بالزبالة
Back home.
ضيق ويسمحون انتبهوا لا يسمحون له لا
I think Garland Nixon calls it the Samsonite option.
وين نولي؟ ننام بالزبالة ضيق
Yep. God's chosen people. And here's another one. This woman is freaking out because the plane is not taking off.
Missile strikes.
The hell?
So apparently because of the missile barrages, they didn't want to leave. The plane didn't want to leave. And, you know, you say to yourself, so you stayed there at the colony of squatters as they murdered 100,000 people in some of the most horrific ways, as they raped a Palestinian man on camera in a prison with the majority of the public saying it's fair game, and even going to try to rescue the soldiers that did it, with them starving millions of people alive to the point where some of them were just dropping from exhaustion. I've shown clips of Israeli soldiers opening up firepower on people who were just trying to get food. They've admitted to dropping bombs on those same people for crowd control reasons who were starving, trying to get food. You watched as they bombed Lebanon, as they stole Lebanese territory. They're bombing Lebanon now. As they bombed and murdered Gazans, as they bombed, or the military stood by, as West Bank settlers stole, injured, beat, and killed Palestinians that was in the West Bank. You watched as they supported ISIS overthrow Syria. And you stayed for all of that. And now you're sitting here on this airplane freaking out because you can't leave your promised land.
Over 150 passengers are still stranded in Thessaloniki, Israel, after the flight repeatedly postponed taking off since yesterday morning due to Iran's non-stop missile strikes.
Yep. That woman needs some coffee. That woman needs some coffee. Here's another one. Interesting watch. God's chosen runners. That is terrifying. And I suspect that explains why many people are effectively leaving. Here's the thing. Part of the reason that Netanyahu does not want people to leave is because if you get, let's say, it's a country of what, 8 million people, 8 million squatters. If you get 4 million to leave, what does it mean, right? Like, what does it do to your country if that many people decides to effectively leave? Because what was supposed to be a safe space is no longer a safe space. Interesting question, right? Same thing with the West Bank, or let's say with Gaza. If Iran is bombing Gaza and damaging Israel's capability of maintaining some kind of control, especially in areas that they've invaded, what does it mean? It seems that Iranian strategy was to effectively decapitate the capability of Israel to exist in real terms. We're going to destroy energy. We're going to destroy certain sectors of government. We're going to destroy the financial districts. We're going to destroy your education centers. We're going to destroy those things, the things that allow you to maintain issues of state. We're going to scare the shit out of the population, where they're either going to be in bomb shelters for a long time, or they're going to get on a boat and they're going to leave. How long can a state of 8 billion people endure that? How long can Iran do that? And with the U.S. entering the war, what does it mean for that plan? These are very interesting questions. These are very, very interesting questions. Who is this? Paula Cat Mama 9 super sticker. Thank you, Paula. Thank you. Look, I'm not going to keep this long. Somebody said stop sipping the coffee so loud. I'm sorry. I'm not going to keep this long. But we are clearly in unpredictable territory, not just as a country, but as a world. And Donald Trump, who got elected on quote unquote peace, who wants the Nobel Prize, who's fighting the deep state, who's surrounded by the deep state, despite the fact that he brought these people into his own administration. He is the one starting these wars. He is in that war in Yemen. He is in that war in Ukraine. He is in that war now with Iran that is going to inflame the Middle East. These are his wars. They can try to make all the excuses in the world for him. These are his wars. Yeah, I ended on that. It's betrayal. It's not just betraying America. It is betraying each and every person who voted for him under this idea that he was going to end these conflicts. And you know what's wild about it? When Donald Trump was effectively thanking everybody, he thanked Israel first, which is, dude, what president, what country are you supposed to be president of? This is one of the most anti-American administrations I have ever seen in my life. And whether that's going after Americans, whether that's using this Gestapo force of ICE to snatch up people who are actually, in many cases, American citizens, whether that's going into foreign wars that is not in America's best interests, using Israeli intelligence as opposed to American intelligence saying your premise is wrong, going after free speech. All of these things are dramatically anti-American and detrimental to anything and any notion of Americanism. And now you have put thousands of American lives at risk for a war of choice that was unprovoked. Let's see if MAGA and its sycophants, its simps, are okay with body bags in the thousands being returned to the U.S., depending upon the Iranian response, or for that matter, depending upon the escalation that the Trump administration goes through. as it gets more embroiled into a war of choice against Iran. That is not even talking about whether or not larger powers get involved. Look, just to be clear, the Middle East is not the United States' purview. Iran is not the United States' purview. Any notion that the United States can launch unprovoked attacks into a sovereign country and not get a response is nonsense. It's just flat out nonsense. All of these MAGA people are thinking with this American point of view, again, jaded, well, they're just going to attack and Iran is not going to do anything. These people are idiots. These people are flat out idiots. If you really think that, Iran is not Iraq. The United States has just attacked another country unprovoked. And you believe that they won't respond and that no response is coming. Whether it takes place now or whether it takes place later, whether the Trump administration feels that they can act with impunity, in which case strikes again, which is going to make it very clear to Iran that they can't wait, that they need to strike because the U.S. is going to continue its strikes. However that plays out, you are not going to get out of this unscathed. And the question for all of these simps that are backing Trump on this is, how many American lives are okay for you to extinguish for an unprovoked war of aggression on behalf of, yes, this deep state and American interests, but also on behalf of a colony of squatters that seems to have a certain level of clout in our politics in a way that is not in America's interest. I'm bookmarking some of those tweets because when American body bags start coming back in the thousands, that's assuming, depends on how Iran responds, I would like to reference those tweets and ask them once again, so is this, how many lives are you willing to give for war of aggression, an unprovoked war of aggression at that? One last point. I'm not going to go into this again because I've explained in my other videos on the overarching geopolitics that's at place. But there is a weird American point of view that frames the argument that if Iran was producing a nuke, then it would be okay to do this. You're out of your minds. Israel has nukes. Why isn't the United States invading Israel? How about that? Right. Iran is a sovereign country. It is not the US's purview to go and attack another country because they believe they have, quote unquote, nukes. Even if they were developing a nuke, that is not the concern of the United States. It's not. The notion that we're going to go in and murder a lot of people because you have nukes is nonsense. Complete nonsense. What that tells people is they need to develop a nuke as fast as possible to prevent that behavior of the US. What this is about is creating a state that is weak enough where you can prey upon an attack without them having the ability of a nuclear option in response to your attacks. There's a reason why North Korea still exists. North Korea still exists because it got a nuke. It's none of our business. There are other agencies that are dealing with issues of nuclear weapons. Iran will most likely pull out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Yes. Iran, frankly, should have already had a nuke. There's that. That may be a controversial opinion, but I stand by it. And more to the point, considering the neighborhood of sociopaths that is against it, every incentive in the world is to create a context by which it can defend itself, where everybody goes. Again, nukes, the benefit of a nuke is not to use it, it's to show it, not to use it. It's a defensive weapon. Everybody understands that the moment that you use a nuke, everybody goes up in smoke. That is not typically what countries want. By the same token, they do understand that from a distribution of force standpoint, that if you don't have one and your opponent does, you are at a severe disadvantage. Now, Iran, for whatever reason, didn't go that route. They enriched because they wanted to force the US to the negotiation table to get rid of sanctions. But that's kind of beyond the point. They were never going to get a fair exchange. These negotiations were never real and honest. The objective, going for the last 20-something years, was always to overthrow the government. It's a dereliction of duty, deep naivety. If they honestly believe, meaning the government, the possession government, that they can really make a deal with this US government. I don't know why they thought that. I suppose they've been disabused of that. And so Donald Trump at the end of his tweet saying, now let's get to negotiations. Out of your mind. I don't know if you actually believe that, or I don't know if you're just tweeting that. You're out of your mind. This is one last point before I leave. I've been right on this stuff. And I would bring people on and they would say, well, why would Trump do that? And I try to make the point that the behavior is consistent. When I pointed out that Donald Trump full well knew what was taking place when they attacked the nuclear triad in Russia and went on all of these, campaigns against the Russian government, blowing up a train, doing all of that stuff, effectively killing civilians, intentionally killing civilians, and that it would have larger consequences. And they said, well, why would Trump do that? Trump is trying to get a deal. And I said, the deal that Donald Trump has on the table is nonsense. The Russians would never accept it. Trump, at this point, has to know the Russians would never accept it. And so in his mind, I need to create a context by which the Russians accept it. What did he come up with? I'm going to escalate a shadow war under the actual war that I was already running. And if I can put enough pain and intimidate Vladimir Putin, then maybe he will be willing to accept the nonsense deal that nobody in real terms believe they're going to accept. That is the behavior of a lunatic, of a incompetent person that in no way can bring their ego to a certain level of reality to realize that would never work. And I'm saying in the same way that he's running this shadow war under the actual war. And by the way, when that didn't work, apparently Donald Trump realized, oh, I fucked up. In which case, you notice he's left the Ukraine thing alone almost entirely, in which case Zelensky is getting taken apart piece by piece. The point that I'm making is he most likely thought that running a shadow war and attacking the nuclear triad would be something to encourage the Russians to accept, or at the very least entertain, his nonsense peace proposal. Ego, racist people don't see the world clearly, especially when they have an exceptionalist mindset. I'm an American president and I can dictate as opposed to having to actually negotiate. That failed. I'm saying he's thinking the same thing with Iran of, if I attack them directly, maybe I can force them back to the negotiating table, and ended up in a nonsense negotiation where they would accept something that they would never accept under normal terms. I've said it before. I'll say it again. Iran is going to have to take its respect at the barrel of a gun. That is unfortunate. It is an unprovoked war of aggression by the United States. Iran, at some point, will respond because they will have to respond, because most likely if they don't respond under my model of things, that the goal of this is regime change, is that if they continue to attack Israel, the U.S., justification or not, they don't have one, it's not really necessary, will attack again, believing that a non-response would mean lack of credibility, that they're somehow scared to respond to the U.S. directly. Either way, I'm saying that they're putting Iran in a corner. Any way you look at it. A lot of this is going to depend on how Iran responds. A lot of it's going to depend on how Trump responds. And we are going to be off to the races. Buckle up. If you back Iran into a corner where you continue attacks on Iran, they will attack you because they have no choice. It's existential. They understand that the goal and the point is the diminishment of the state, to turn it into a failed state like Syria or Lebanon, something that can be preyed upon and attacked. They know it. The catch becomes, how do you maneuver that? Is going to be the fascinating question. You don't want the U.S. to have a justification to get into the war. If they get in, fair enough, but they're getting in on their own steam, not because you gave them a reason to. They're already a part of the war. You already know they're part of the war, but the optics of it and the language that is being used is as if the U.S. is not directly involved. Well, they're now directly involved. In earnest, directly. So the world can see it. Unprovoked attack. You have every right to respond. Every right. But, like most things, it's not about right and wrong. It's about power. Do you have the power to do something about it? Not about what's right, ethical, moral, any of that stuff. The United States doesn't do things because they're right or moral. They do them because they have the power to do it. They didn't attack Iran because they had the right to attack Iran. They did it because they could, under the belief that Iran's response could not necessarily, let's say, damage us in a certain way, in a way that we may be able to potentially damage them. Let's see if they're right. This also assumes that other countries are going to stay out. Let's see if they're right. These are all question marks. These are question marks. Yep. Sparky, nukes aren't the issue at all. It's a red herring, yes, but could now be used as an excuse for Israel to stop, since Iran might stop if Israel stops. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I get your point. Your thinking is Donald Trump came out and declared victory. And because he declared victory, his thought is, okay, Israel no longer, if indeed Israel is going with this stalking horse pretense that they're concerned about nukes, that now Israel can say, all right, well, Donald Trump says that the nukes have, they don't have them anymore because we've blown them up. And so now we can stop our attacks because Donald Trump has effectively handled the issue with the nukes. In which case, they stop. But the problem with the logic, Sparky, is that the U.S. has just launched an unprovoked war of aggression against Iran. It's that part. How does Iran not respond to that? Now, you can say Iran can respond in a limited manner, and in that limited response, the U.S. would have to make a choice on, do we not respond? Because it's limited, and they created parity. Will the U.S. do that? I mean, that's the answer to your question, Spark. It's kind of an equation, right? It's not really a yes or no that we can really answer. Israel could say, okay, we're stopping. The U.S. could say, we're not going to attack anymore. What does Iran do? They've just been attacked. You spent 2 months telling people, your entire country, that you are going to punish the U.S. if they do so. What do you do? What do you do? I get it, Spark. I know your point. I get your point. I get your point. I do get your point. All right. We have come to the end. I didn't want the show to go long, but I definitely wanted to try to break down what is taking place and I guess all of the dynamics at work. It's fascinating. We'll see what it means going forward. I'm making no predictions on this. I can only give you questions. But this can range everything from Iran responds and everything stops. Because Sparky, if you're right, Iran responds and the U.S. says, okay, you didn't really hurt us. You didn't touch us. You didn't kill anybody. You damaged a little bit superficially. So we're going to call this shit a day. The U.S. could do that. It could. In which case, the entire point of this enterprise would have been not to get on an escalatory spiral, but to stop, to give Israel a breather from getting punched. Basically, I need to get my guy out the ring. And I don't want to get embroiled into a larger Middle East conflict, especially considering how strong Iran is. It could be that. It could be that. I don't know. It could also be we just want to get on the escalatory spiral, and this is a way to do it in a more organic fashion. It could be that too. Don't know. I don't know. I do not know. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. Wait, there's one more. Sparky, I hope Iran responds, but deals like that have to be made before. Yes. 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 Sparky, you're fantastic. Yes. Meaning you would need some level of back channel communication that says, hey, we need to be on the same page. We need to show a little bit of theater. We know you removed all of your stuff, so we're going to hit that, but we're just going to be superficial. We know you're going to respond because you have to save face for the population. And we're not going to respond back. I'm going to shake my fists. We're going to call it a day. Now, if that is the case, Sparky, they're doing that entirely to save Israel's ass. That's why they will be doing it, if that's the case. If you're right, and that's the case, they're doing it to save Israel's ass. We will know in a few days on how Iran responds and on what the U.S. does after. We'd also will know if Israel continues attacks. If Israel fires a firecracker at Iran, then that plan goes up in smoke. If Iran responds and Trump responds, your plan goes up in smoke. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Like I said, man, buckle up. Buckle up. Get John Helmer, Justin Pudor. That's assuming they would like to come on. That's assuming they like to come on. As for China, look, China doesn't want to get involved in a shooting war. They'll help because they understand what the United States is trying to do. I mean, for fuck's sake, they even put it out in U.S. media right now at this point. Where is it? 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 Like they're even saying the quiet part aloud in U.S. media that this has a lot to do with China because China and Iran have a relationship. Something that I've told you for a while now. Where is it? 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 You can never find those articles when you're looking for them. Needless to say, we will see how this unfolds. We'll see how it unfolds. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm looking at there's more reporting that's coming out. We're still in the fog of war on some of this. We'll see. Sparky, you could be right. This could be his way of trying to save Netanyahu's ass. We'll see. We will see. All right. Oh, new member. Vincent. Oh, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that last thing is. Thank you, Vincent. I appreciate it. Look, Sparky, you could be right. This could be an attempt, oddly enough, at de-escalation. One caveat. When Iran responds, because they have to, they're in the box, what does Trump do? What does he do? Now, if Iran responds in a way that doesn't kill anybody, it just damages property, and Trump leaves it, then you're right. Then this is effectively throwing their body on Israel to save it, because they see their colony getting taken apart. Frankly, I say I'm bloodthirsty. It's not, I kind of am on this one. I always say I'm transparent with you, so I'm going to be transparent, even if it makes me a horrible person. Iran shouldn't stop. They should turn that place to glass. If the original objective was to make it a non-functional colony, then do so. Then do so. The U.S. does not have a justification to continuously get involved in the conflict. If they do, it is obvious at that point they're trying to save their client. Meaning, if you hit the U.S. and they stop, if you continue to hit Israel, then what? Does the U.S. get further involved? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, what if it just continues to hit Israel and you don't hit the U.S. immediately? Then what? Does the U.S. get further involved? Like, if you're right, Sparky, then they're trying to save their colony. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I only have questions on this one. I only have questions. It'd be interesting to see if Iran wants to de-escalate themselves. I guess the thing I'm thinking about is what happens next. Let's say you back away from the stove now, then what? Are you going to have to do this again in 5 years? And if you're going to have to do it again in 5 years, do you really want to back away from the stove now, or do you want to turn that place to glass while you have a chance? You were hit in an unprovoked attack. They killed many of your people in that unprovoked attack. That genocidal colony has murdered hundreds of thousands of people. Do you want to allow it to continue to exist? And do you have the power to make it not exist? And are you willing to use the power to make it not exist? Especially if you may have to fight this war again in 5 years, because the empire is not going to stop coming after you. This is just, a waylay. This is, a breather. Russia is not giving Ukraine a ceasefire because Ukraine is on the ropes and it wants to finish the conflict. Why am I going to give you time to bring back more materials, more manpower, etc., all to do this again? The strategy was used in Gaza over and over again. I'm sorry, I'm thinking this on the fly, but I think it's right. The strategy was used in Gaza over and over again also, where they would come up with a ceasefire with just enough time to rearm Israel for it to do it again and continue this murder spree. Any ceasefire that takes place here will most likely be for the exact same reason, to rearm Israel, give it a breather, and give it time to go on another attack. Do you do that if you're Iran? And are you thinking in those terms if you're Iran? Especially if you think you have an advantage where you can continue strikes continuously for weeks, if not months. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not there. So, it's hard for me to say. It's to save an ass who doesn't deserve to be saved. Well, obviously they don't deserve to be saved, Sparky. Conscious gentleman, thank you, Jamal. Well, thank you, conscious gentleman. Iran should keep maximum pressure on Israel. Right there, Sparky, is the catch. But if you're right, and it's worked out in advance that the entire point of this is to save Israel's ass and to give them a breather because they've been taking hits, and Iran's hits might get more escalatory, meaning taking out the Dimona nuclear power facility, taking out the Knesset, taking out certain leaders, et cetera, et cetera. You get my point. How long does that breather last? And do you really trust the United States and Israel to give up on the task of trying to overthrow the Iranian government? Especially if you're Iran, what are you thinking in this case? Do you follow through and finish it? Knowing that if the goal is to save Israel's ass, then saving their ass is not going to stop if you continue to hit Israel. Also, under the model, at some point, Iran will have to hit the United States, meaning ships, troops, etc. So, Sparky, I don't know. I'm very dicey with saying what they should or shouldn't do because I don't live there. They're the ones that have to deal with the civilian death toll, the consequences of their actions. So what they do is on them, right? But these are questions that I would imagine they're going to have to engage. If you're sitting in a room with the Ayatollah and you're thinking, okay, what do we do next? You can say, we're only just going to keep hitting Israel. And you can say, well, the U.S. wants a way out for Israel to stop them. And if we keep hitting them, the U.S. is going to get further involved. You can say all that stuff. I don't know how it shakes out. We'll see how it shakes out as time goes on. But good point, Sparky. Damn good point. And I agree with you. There would have to be some kind of back channel if you're going to do this thing of, okay, we're going to strike, but you're not going to respond to us after we strike you back in order to create parity. But again, the entire point of that model will be to save Israel's ass. That would be the entire point of that model. If Iran agreed to this, it was a mistake. Oh, I'm uncomfortable saying that because Iran is the one that's involved. Let me ask you this. Right now, the U.S. is using a client to attack to attack Iran. They've done superficial strikes on Iran. How far is Iran willing to go in regards to a war with the United States? Because, Sparky, that's your question. That's ultimately the question. In fact, that's the question looming on all of this. Regardless of what it is in real terms, whether it's we're on the escalatory ladder or whether it's this is them trying to save Israel's ass, lingering behind that is how far is Iran willing to go in regards to a war with the U.S., especially if they're trying to end the U.S. client state of Israel. Obviously, the U.S. is going to get further involved. And if Iran attacks the U.S., obviously the U.S. is going to get further involved. How far is Iran willing to go? And, what's the point, how far are other countries willing to go to help Iran in doing so? I don't ask for it, Sparky. Iran says they would not surrender to anyone. Well, that's just it. It ain't that good. It's not surrender if you reach parity. You save face. Iran just got attacked. Iran attacks the U.S. Maybe they hit multiple bases. Iran, through back channel, tells the U.S. which bases they're going to hit so the people aren't there. They just damage the bases. Maybe they injure people, but they don't kill anybody. The U.S. says, shakes their fists. We're very angry about this, but they don't respond. Okay, that's not a surrender. That's parity. That's, we stepped on the escalator with you, the escalatory ladder, and everybody stopped. Now again, the catch becomes, if the U.S. hits back, then this plane is out the window. The goal is regime change, or at the very least assert some kind of dominance. And the other point is, if Iran doesn't respond to the U.S. and just continues to hit Israel, if we're right and the entire point of this is to save Israel, which it is, then the U.S. will get involved again in strikes further. Any way you look at it, Iran is in a corner. They have to respond in some fashion. That's why I'm super interested in their response. And I'm super interested in the response after their response. That's kind of going to tell us, give us more context on what's going on. All right. I am going to end this. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. Actually, I did that video so you can see what Putin said. Putin pointed out we're fighting the same people. He was pissed off that people kept asking him, what is Russia going to do? Why Russia doesn't get involved? Maybe Russia put something about laying off Gaza, etc., on the deal. That's not what's been happening. They've been murdering more Gazans while this has been taking place. They've been taking it out on Gaza as this has been happening. So, Sparky, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. 1,000 times I haven't seen it. All right, guys. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. Subscribe. You guys have a fantastic day. We are into fuckery. We're into fuckery. We'll see how far it goes. We'll see if the U.S. is trying to save Iran, save Israel. We'll see if Iran even allows the U.S. to try to save Israel. We'll see how far the U.S. is willing to go to save Israel, meaning if they're going to continue strikes. We'll see how far Iran is, whether their threats are credible or whether it's kind of a, smoke and mirrors, just kind of face-saving response, or whether they consider we're at war in earnest and we respond strongly in kind. We'll see. We'll see. As I said, these were superficial strikes. The issue is not the fact that they were superficial. You've invaded a fucking country. You bombed their country. This shit is outrageous. They have to respond either way. You all have a fantastic day. Be safe. Be kind. And I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Have a good one all.